My name is Jonathan Miller, and this is the story of how my life, once filled with promise and happiness, was torn apart by the betrayal of my wife, Jessica. It's a tale of love turned to dust, trust shattered beyond repair, and a journey toward justice that I never imagined I would embark upon. Jessica and I met in college, where our connection was immediate and intense. We shared late-night conversations about our dreams, our fears, and our future. She was the first person I ever truly felt I could trust completely. Her laughter was a melody that brightened even my darkest days, and her support was a constant source of strength. As we transitioned from college to adulthood, our bond only deepened. We got married and started a life together that seemed perfect from the outside. Our home was warm, our social life vibrant, and our relationship seemed rock solid. For years, I was convinced that our marriage was an unbreakable fortress. We celebrated anniversaries, achieved personal milestones, and supported each other through life's challenges. To me, Jessica was more than a wife. She was my confidant, my best friend, and my partner in every sense of the word. I believed that we were building a future together, one based on mutual love and respect. However, this illusion of perfection was shattered in an instant. It all started on what should have been an ordinary Tuesday evening. I had come home from work, worn out from a particularly grueling day. My job was demanding, and that day had been especially taxing, with numerous deadlines and challenging projects. As I entered our home, the comforting familiarity of my surroundings was a welcome relief. I was looking forward to a quiet night, perhaps a simple dinner, and a chance to unwind. As I entered the living room, I noticed Jessica's phone lying unattended on the coffee table. The screen was lit up with a notification, which caught my eye. It was unusual for her to leave her phone out like this. She was always meticulous about keeping it close. My curiosity got the better of me, and I picked up the phone, thinking I might check if she needed anything, or if there was a message I could relay to her. What I saw next was something I never anticipated. On the screen was a messaging app with several open threads. The messages were not just casual exchanges, but were filled with a level of intimacy that was both shocking and deeply hurtful. There were numerous conversations with men whose names I didn't recognize: Mike, Dan, Rick, and James. Each thread was a painful revelation, a record of betrayal that left no room for misinterpretation. The messages were not just innocent flirtations. They were explicit, affectionate, and suggestive. They detailed secret rendezvous, coded plans for hidden meetings, and declarations of affection that were meant for someone else. It was as if each message was a blow to my trust, tearing away at the foundation of our relationship. The impact was immediate and devastating. My heart raced, and I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. The comfortable familiarity of my home suddenly felt alien and hostile. The reality of Jessica's deceit was overwhelming, and I struggled to make sense of it. How could someone I loved so deeply, someone I had shared so much with, be capable of such profound dishonesty? I spent the evening in a haze of disbelief and anger, trying to piece together the extent of Jessica's betrayal. Each new message I read seemed to cut deeper, revealing a pattern of infidelity that had been hidden from me. The pain was almost physical, a heavy weight pressing down on my chest. As I came to grips with the extent of Jessica's betrayal, I knew that my life was about to change dramatically. The trust I had in her, the vision of our future together, all of it was gone. What followed was a journey of discovery and reckoning, one that would force me to confront not only the depth of her deception, but also the path I would take to find justice and reclaim my sense of self. The initial revelation of Jessica's infidelity was like a thunderbolt tearing through my life, but the depth of my shock only deepened as I began to understand the full extent of her betrayal. The messages on her phone were not isolated incidents. They were part of a complex and prolonged affair that spanned several months. The realization that this wasn't a one-time lapse in judgment, but rather a sustained pattern of deceit, was almost too much to bear. As I delved into the messages, it became clear that Jessica's infidelity was not just a single misstep, but a series of deliberate and calculated betrayals. The conversation stretched back over a significant period, showing a disturbing continuity of dishonesty. The dates on the messages revealed that her affairs were not occasional slip-ups, but ongoing relationships that she had maintained over several months. Each exchange was a testament to her careful planning and deceptive behavior, making it clear that her unfaithfulness was a recurring part of her life rather than an anomaly. The emotional impact of this realization was overwhelming. I felt as if the ground beneath me had shifted, leaving me unsteady and disoriented. The trust I had in Jessica was shattered, not just because of the act of betrayal itself, but because of the sustained deceit that had occurred over such a long time. The magnitude of her actions was a brutal blow to my sense of reality. It wasn't just that she had been unfaithful, it was that she had been living a double life for months, concealing her true feelings and actions while maintaining the facade of a committed wife. Reflecting on our years together, the full scope of Jessica's betrayal became even more painful. As I pieced together the evidence from her phone, I realized that her infidelity involved not just one or two men, but four different individuals: Mike, Dan, Rick, and James. Each of these men was a separate thread in the web of deceit she had spun, and understanding their involvement added layers of complexity to my heartbreak. Mike was the first name that caught my eye. His messages were filled with intimate details and plans for clandestine meetings. It became evident that he was someone she had been seeing frequently. He was more than a casual fling. He was a significant part of her life during this period of betrayal. The nature of their conversations suggested a deep emotional connection, and the thought that Mike had been a regular presence in her life was particularly painful. Dan's messages revealed another dimension to the betrayal. His interactions with Jessica were marked by a blend of flirtation and seriousness. It was clear from their exchanges that their relationship had an emotional depth, and their conversations often touched on personal matters, as if they had a relationship that went beyond mere physical attraction. Rick's involvement was equally distressing. His messages were more explicit and revealed a physical relationship that was both frequent and intense. The graphic nature of their exchanges underscored the depth of Jessica's infidelity and highlighted how she had compartmentalized her relationships, maintaining different levels of intimacy with each man. James was the final piece of the puzzle. His messages indicated that their relationship was more sporadic, but no less significant. They had shared moments of intimacy and connection, and the frequency of their interactions, though less regular than the others, was still a testament to Jessica's ongoing deceit. The realization that Jessica had been involved with four different men over an extended period was a crushing blow. It was not just the betrayal itself, but the multiplicity of her deceit that made it so devastating. Each man represented a separate piece of the puzzle, and together they painted a picture of a woman who had been living a lie, not just for a single night, but for months on end. As I came to terms with the breadth of Jessica's betrayal, I felt a profound sense of loss. The life I had built with her, the future I had envisioned, was now marred by her repeated infidelities. The trust and love that had once been the foundation of our relationship were replaced by a deep and pervasive sense of betrayal. The enormity of what I had discovered was almost too great to comprehend, and the pain of realizing that my wife had been leading such a duplicitous life left me reeling and searching for a way to navigate through the emotional wreckage of our shattered marriage. The devastation I felt after uncovering Jessica's betrayals was overwhelming, but it quickly transformed into a steely resolve. I realized that simply confronting her or revealing the affair wouldn't be enough to address the depth of the pain and betrayal I had endured. I wanted something more profound, a way to exact justice not just for the betrayal itself, but for the calculated deceit that had marred months of my life. I began to formulate a plan that went beyond mere disclosure. I wanted to ensure that Jessica and her lovers faced a reckoning that matched the gravity of their actions. It wasn't enough for me to simply expose the affair. I needed to find a way to make them face real consequences for the harm they had caused. My mind raced with strategies, considering how best to leverage the evidence I had gathered to achieve this goal. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became that I needed to target each of Jessica's lovers individually. I wanted to ensure that they paid a price not only for their involvement in the affair, but also for their roles in the deception. Each man had contributed to the betrayal in his way, and I felt that they should all be held accountable. My plan involved gathering comprehensive evidence that would be undeniable in its clarity and impact. I decided that I would use this evidence to expose each man's actions in a way that would have significant repercussions for them. It wasn't just about revenge. It was about ensuring that they faced the consequences of their actions, which I believed would ultimately serve as a form of justice for the violation I had experienced. I also knew that my plan needed to be methodical and meticulous. Rash actions or emotional decisions could backfire, so I took the time to carefully consider each step. My objective was to use the evidence to not only reveal the affair, but also to create situations where the men would face legal or personal repercussions. This required a strategic approach to ensure that the evidence was presented in a way that would be most effective in achieving my goals. The process of gathering evidence was a painstaking and emotionally draining task. I needed to collect every piece of information that would substantiate my claims of Jessica's infidelity and the involvement of her lovers. My objective was to build a comprehensive and irrefutable case that would serve as the foundation for my plan of retribution. I began by meticulously cataloging the messages I had discovered on Jessica's phone. Each conversation was carefully documented, noting the dates, times, and content of the exchanges. I took screenshots of the text messages, ensuring that each one was clear and legible. This process was painstaking, as I had to sift through months of communication to extract the relevant information. In addition to the text messages, I gathered photographs and videos that Jessica had taken or received during her affairs. These visual pieces of evidence were crucial in demonstrating the physical nature of the relationships. I found images that were intimate and explicit, as well as photos that showed Jessica with her lovers in various settings. Each photo and video was saved and organized meticulously, ensuring that they were labeled with context and date. To ensure that I had a complete picture, I also collected any other forms of evidence that could be relevant. This included phone call logs, email correspondences, and any additional digital evidence that could support my case. I made sure to back up all the evidence securely to prevent any accidental loss or tampering. The process was not only time-consuming, but also emotionally taxing. Each piece of evidence was a stark reminder of the betrayal I had endured, and revisiting these moments repeatedly was a painful experience. However, I remained focused on my goal. The more evidence I gathered, the more empowered I felt in my quest for justice. Once I had assembled a comprehensive dossier of evidence, I reviewed it carefully to ensure that it was thorough and compelling. I aimed to have a collection of proof that would leave no room for denial or dispute. I wanted to be prepared for any eventuality, whether that meant presenting the evidence in a legal context or using it to confront Jessica and her lovers directly. The preparation of this evidence was a critical component of my plan. It was the tool that would allow me to execute my strategy effectively and ensure that the repercussions of Jessica's actions were felt by all involved. By being meticulous and thorough, I hoped to achieve a resolution that was proportional to the scale of the betrayal and the pain it had caused me. As I delved deeper into the lives of Jessica's lovers, determined to exact justice for the betrayal I had endured, I stumbled upon an unexpected and alarming discovery. Among the men Jessica had been seeing, Mike stood out not only for his involvement in the affair, but also for his participation in illegal activities. The revelation was both shocking and fortuitous, presenting an opportunity for me to strike a blow that would have real consequences. It started with a series of unsettling clues that emerged from the evidence I had gathered. As I reviewed Mike's messages and interactions with Jessica, I began to notice references to activities that went beyond mere personal indiscretions. There were mentions of large sums of money, coded references to illegal transactions, and discussions about business dealings that seemed highly suspicious. The more I investigated, the clearer it became that Mike was involved in criminal activities that extended far beyond his affair with Jessica. The pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. Mike was not just a casual participant in Jessica's infidelity. He was deeply entangled in a web of financial misconduct. His messages included detailed discussions about laundering money, evading taxes, and other illicit schemes. The evidence was damning, painting a picture of a man who was using his charm and deceptive practices to hide his criminal activities. Armed with this new information, I decided to act decisively. My goal was not only to confront Mike with his actions, but also to ensure that he faced legal repercussions for his illegal activities. I meticulously compiled all the evidence I had collected regarding his criminal behavior. This included screenshots of conversations, details of financial transactions, and any other documentation that could substantiate his involvement in the illegal activities. The process of reporting Mike's activities to the authorities was both strategic and delicate. I wanted to ensure that the evidence I provided was compelling and clear, so I worked with a sense of purpose and urgency. I contacted the appropriate law enforcement agencies, including the local police and federal investigators, and submitted a comprehensive report detailing Mike's involvement in the criminal activities. I made sure to include all relevant evidence, presenting it in a way that would facilitate a thorough investigation. In my report, I provided a detailed account of the illegal activities Mike was involved in, including descriptions of the fraudulent schemes, the financial transactions, and the connections between his actions and the evidence I had gathered. I also included a timeline of his interactions with Jessica, illustrating how his criminal behavior was intertwined with his personal affairs. The impact of my actions was swift and significant. Within weeks, Mike's name began to surface in legal investigations and news reports. The authorities acted on the evidence I had provided, launching a full-scale investigation into his activities. It was both gratifying and unsettling to see the consequences of my actions unfolding as Mike's criminal dealings were exposed and brought to light. As the investigation progressed, it became clear that Mike faced serious legal consequences for his actions. The severity of the charges against him underscored the gravity of the situation and the effectiveness of the evidence I had presented. The sense of justice I felt was tempered by the realization that my actions had contributed to a larger legal battle that would affect many lives, including my own. As I continued to unravel the web of deceit surrounding Jessica and her lovers, I stumbled upon further evidence that escalated the gravity of their crimes. Dan and Rick, who had already been implicated in various forms of misconduct, were deeply involved in large-scale financial fraud. This discovery was both alarming and pivotal in my quest for justice. The evidence revealed that Dan and Rick were not just small-time offenders, but key players in sophisticated financial schemes. Dan had been orchestrating a complex network of fraudulent investment ventures, involving millions of dollars in illicit transactions. His operations were designed to deceive investors and manipulate financial markets, making him a significant player in financial fraud. Rick's involvement was equally concerning. He was part of a large-scale money laundering operation that utilized a network of shell companies and fraudulent financial transactions to obscure the origins of illicit funds. His activities were not only illegal, but also had a far-reaching impact, affecting numerous unsuspecting individuals and businesses. With this new evidence in hand, I knew I needed to act swiftly and decisively. The scale of their fraud demanded that I escalate the matter to federal authorities who had the resources and jurisdiction to address such significant criminal activities. I compiled a comprehensive report detailing the fraudulent schemes orchestrated by Dan and Rick. This report included evidence of their financial transactions, connections to other criminal enterprises, and detailed accounts of their illegal activities. I submitted the information to the federal agencies specializing in financial crimes, including the Federal Bureau of Investigation (FBI) and the Securities and Exchange Commission (SEC). I made sure to present the evidence in a clear and organized manner, highlighting the severity of their actions and the potential impact on the financial system. The response from the federal agencies was prompt and serious. The evidence I provided initiated a federal investigation into Dan and Rick's activities. This investigation aimed to uncover the full extent of their financial crimes and bring them to justice. Watching the federal authorities take action against them was both gratifying and nerve-wracking. The scale of their fraudulent operations was vast, and I knew that bringing them to justice would be a complex and lengthy process. James was a different kind of challenge. Unlike Dan and Rick, who were involved in high-level financial crimes, James was a professional gambler. His activities were more insidious, involving a network of illegal gambling operations and high-stakes betting. I needed a strategy that would effectively expose his wrongdoing and ensure that he faced consequences for his actions. I decided to set a trap for James, leveraging his gambling habits against him. Knowing that James was deeply involved in high-stakes betting and had a history of accumulating significant gambling debts, I devised a plan to exploit this vulnerability. My goal was to create a situation where he would be caught in a significant amount of debt, leading to a broader investigation into his activities. I began by subtly manipulating the gambling environment that James frequented. I arranged for him to be involved in a high-stakes game with seemingly lucrative but ultimately rigged opportunities. The setup was designed to ensure that James would incur substantial losses pushing him into a precarious financial position. Once James was deeply entangled in debt, I coordinated with various criminal circles to ensure that word of his predicament spread. I knew that exposing his financial trouble would attract attention and could lead to further scrutiny of his activities. By creating a situation where James was unable to repay his debts and was vulnerable to pressure from various quarters, I hoped to trigger an investigation into his gambling operations. As expected, the trap worked. James's escalating debt became a topic of discussion within criminal circles, drawing unwanted attention to his activities. The pressure mounted on him, and his involvement in illegal gambling operations was scrutinized by law enforcement. I reported his predicament to the authorities, providing evidence of his financial troubles and connections to illegal gambling networks. The investigation into James's activities led to significant legal repercussions. His gambling operations were exposed, and he faced legal consequences for his involvement in illegal betting and associated crimes. The trap I had set effectively unraveled his illicit activities and brought them to light, ensuring that he too faced justice for his role in the broader web of deceit. In the end, the combined efforts to expose Dan, Rick, and James demonstrated the breadth of their criminal activities and the lengths I was willing to go to achieve justice. Each step in this process was part of a larger strategy to address the betrayal I had suffered and ensure that those involved faced appropriate consequences for their actions. As the investigations into the men who had been involved with Jessica unfolded, her world began to crumble around her. The consequences of their actions were becoming increasingly apparent, and the gravity of the situation started to sink in for her. Jessica, who had once been the orchestrator of such profound deceit, found herself caught in the whirlwind of the repercussions. Initially, Jessica was in complete shock. The revelations of the men's criminal activities, the legal consequences they faced, and the exposure of her role in the affairs were overwhelming. She had been living in a bubble of denial, convinced that her actions would remain hidden and that the facade of her life would continue unbroken. However, as the truth emerged and the men faced legal repercussions, her sense of control began to disintegrate. Her initial response was one of confusion and panic. She struggled to grasp the full extent of what was happening and why everything was falling apart so quickly. The reality of the situation was stark and unsettling. Jessica began to experience a profound sense of fear and anxiety as the consequences of her actions became increasingly apparent. Her once comfortable life was now marred by public scrutiny and legal troubles. As the situation progressed, Jessica's emotional state deteriorated further. She found herself isolated from her former social circles and friends who were once her confidants. The public scandal surrounding her actions led to a wave of judgment and criticism, leaving her feeling abandoned and exposed. Her attempts to seek solace or understanding from those around her were met with indifference or scorn, amplifying her feelings of isolation. The mounting pressure took a toll on her mental health, manifesting in sleepless nights and bouts of depression. Jessica's daily life became a series of stressful confrontations with legal authorities and relentless media scrutiny. The weight of her actions and the relentless reminders of her betrayals left her struggling to maintain a sense of normalcy. Each day brought new challenges and a deepening sense of despair as she grappled with the irreversible damage to her life. In her panic, Jessica attempted to justify her behavior. She reached out to me, trying to explain her actions and minimize the impact of her betrayals. Her justifications were a mix of denial and blame-shifting, as she tried to portray herself as a victim of circumstance rather than acknowledging the full extent of her wrongdoing. She was desperate to salvage whatever remained of her reputation and avoid the full brunt of the consequences. Despite her attempts to rationalize her behavior, Jessica's efforts were largely in vain. The evidence against her and the men involved was overwhelming, and her explanations did little to mitigate the damage. Her sense of control and denial was replaced by a growing realization of the irreparable harm she had caused and the severe consequences she now faced. The depth of her situation became increasingly clear, leaving her to confront the harsh reality of her choices and their far-reaching effects. With Dan, Rick, Mike, and James all facing significant legal consequences, the impact of their actions reverberated through their lives and beyond. Their involvement in criminal activities had led to their arrest and prosecution, and the repercussions of their actions were far-reaching. Dan and Rick, once significant figures in the world of financial fraud, found themselves in federal custody, facing charges that carried severe penalties. The investigations had revealed the full extent of their schemes, and the legal battles ahead promised to be both lengthy and damaging. Their once lucrative operations had been dismantled, and their reputations were irreparably tarnished. The financial and legal fallout was a testament to the scale of their criminal activities. Mike's involvement in criminal activities had already led to his imprisonment, and the legal consequences he faced continued to unfold. His arrest had been just the beginning of a broader legal process that would determine the full extent of his liability. His life had been upended, and the repercussions of his actions were clear. James, too, faced the consequences of his illegal gambling operations. His trap had successfully exposed his involvement in high-stakes betting and money laundering. The investigation into his activities led to his arrest and prosecution, with the legal system addressing his role in the criminal network he was part of. As I observed these events unfold, I maintained a cold and detached demeanor. The satisfaction of seeing justice served was tempered by the realization of the profound impact of these actions on multiple lives. The men who had been involved with Jessica faced the legal consequences of their criminal activities, and their lives were left in disarray. Jessica's life, too, was irrevocably changed. The exposure of her affairs, the legal repercussions faced by the men, and the public scrutiny she faced created a situation from which there was no easy escape. Her attempts to salvage her reputation and justify her actions were largely futile, as the evidence against her and the men was too compelling to ignore. The aftermath of these events was a complex and multifaceted experience. While the legal system addressed the criminal activities of Dan, Rick, Mike, and James, the personal fallout for Jessica was equally significant. The collapse of her world, the unraveling of her deceit, and the public exposure of her actions created a profound and lasting impact on her life. As I watched the consequences unfold, I felt a sense of cold detachment. The process of seeking justice had been arduous and emotionally taxing, but the resolution of these events brought a measure of closure to the turmoil that had dominated my life. The impact on Jessica and the men involved was a stark reminder of the far-reaching consequences of betrayal and deceit. The time had come for a confrontation with Jessica. The revelations of her betrayals and the subsequent fallout had created a profound shift in our lives, and it was essential for me to address the situation head-on. I had spent months meticulously unraveling the complex web of deceit involving Jessica and her lovers, and now it was time to lay bare the full extent of the consequences. I arranged a meeting with Jessica, choosing a neutral setting to ensure that the conversation remained focused and civil. As she arrived, the look of apprehension on her face was unmistakable. She was aware that the situation was dire, but the full scope of what I had orchestrated was something she had yet to fully grasp. When we sat down, I began by calmly laying out the facts. I detailed the evidence I had collected, starting with her initial infidelities and extending to the criminal activities of her lovers. I made it clear that her betrayals had not only caused profound personal pain, but had also led to a chain reaction of legal consequences for those involved. I explained how Dan, Rick, Mike, and James had been exposed, and how their lives had been significantly disrupted, all as a result of the evidence and actions I had taken. Jessica's reaction was a mix of disbelief and defensiveness. She tried to downplay her role, suggesting that her actions were a result of circumstances or pressures she had been facing. However, her justifications did little to mitigate the reality of the situation. I pointed out that the men involved had faced legal repercussions because of the clear and compelling evidence I had provided, and that her actions had set off a series of events that had led to their downfall. I told her unequivocally that it was my efforts that had ensured they were held accountable. The impact of the exposure and the legal consequences were not just coincidental. They were the direct result of the meticulous work I had done to uncover their wrongdoings. I wanted her to understand that the price they had paid was directly linked to the actions I had taken. The conversation was emotionally charged, with Jessica struggling to maintain her composure. She attempted to argue that the situation was more complex than I portrayed, but I remained steadfast in my stance. I made it clear that while she might seek to rationalize her actions, the consequences were undeniable, and had been set in motion by the choices she made. Following the confrontation, it was evident that our marriage was beyond repair. The trust and respect that once formed the foundation of our relationship had been shattered beyond reconciliation. The decision to proceed with a divorce was both a personal and legal necessity, and it was clear that the dissolution of our marriage was imminent. The divorce process was complex and emotionally charged. Our once shared life, including assets, finances, and personal belongings, was now subject to division and negotiation. Given the circumstances and the profound breach of trust, I sought to ensure that the outcome was equitable and reflective of the situation's severity. One of my primary goals during the divorce proceedings was to address the financial aspects of our separation. I was determined to ensure that Jessica faced significant repercussions for her actions, particularly in terms of her financial stability. The betrayal and deceit she had engaged in had far-reaching consequences, and I believed it was important for her to face a tangible and impactful reckoning. I worked with my legal team to scrutinize our financial records and assets, identifying areas where I could leverage the situation to my advantage. I focused on highlighting the financial implications of her actions, including any losses or damages that resulted from her deceitful behavior. The objective was to create a scenario where Jessica's financial stability was significantly undermined, exacerbating the challenges she had tried to hide. In the end, the divorce settlement reflected the full extent of our mutual financial responsibilities and the repercussions of Jessica's actions. I sought to ensure that the division of assets and financial support were aligned with the gravity of the situation. This included seeking compensation for the emotional and financial toll caused by her betrayals and ensuring that the terms of the settlement left her in a precarious financial position. As the divorce was finalized, Jessica's financial stability was effectively destroyed. The legal and financial consequences of the divorce were substantial, leaving her to grapple with the fallout from her actions. The once secure financial foundation she had relied on was now in shambles, further compounding the challenges she faced. The process of divorce and retribution was a significant chapter in the aftermath of Jessica's betrayal. While it brought a sense of closure and justice, it was also a reminder of the profound impact of deceit and the lengths to which I had gone to seek retribution. The dismantling of Jessica's financial stability was a direct consequence of the choices she had made, and it underscored the reality of the repercussions that followed her actions. As the dust settled from the tumultuous series of events, I found myself standing alone, but with a profound sense of closure. The whirlwind of betrayal, retribution, and legal battles had reached its end, leaving me to reflect on the journey I had undergone and the resolution I had achieved. The process of seeking justice for the betrayals I had endured was exhaustive and emotionally draining. The meticulous investigation, the confrontation with Jessica, and the subsequent legal and financial consequences for her and her lovers had consumed much of my time and energy. The aftermath was a mixture of relief and melancholy as I navigated the final stages of this personal and legal odyssey. In the wake of the divorce and the dismantling of the lives of those involved, my own life began to return to a semblance of normalcy. The immediate chaos had subsided, and the legal battles that had dominated my existence were finally resolved. The sense of justice I had sought so fervently was achieved, and the satisfaction of seeing those who had wronged me face consequences provided a degree of solace. Yet despite the resolution and the sense of accomplishment, the experience had left an indelible mark. The emotional toll of the betrayals and the relentless pursuit of justice had changed me. The process had been a crucible of sorts, shaping my perspective on trust, betrayal, and retribution. It was a period of intense introspection and personal growth, as I grappled with the complexities of the situation and the lessons it imparted. As I moved forward, I focused on rebuilding my life and finding a new path. The remnants of the past were still present, but they no longer held the same power over me. The closure of the legal battles and the finalization of the divorce marked the beginning of a new chapter. I was determined to embrace this new phase with a sense of purpose and optimism. The journey of seeking justice taught me valuable lessons about resilience and the importance of standing up for oneself. While the pain of betrayal had been profound, the resolution had provided a sense of empowerment. I had faced the challenges head-on, navigated the complexities of the legal system, and emerged with a renewed sense of self. In the end, I was left with a profound sense of satisfaction. The pursuit of justice had been arduous, but it had brought a measure of resolution and allowed me to move forward with my life. The experience had been transformative, and I was ready to embrace the future with a newfound clarity and strength. The finality of the situation was both a relief and a reminder of the journey I had undergone. I had faced the depths of betrayal and emerged with a sense of justice and closure. Life had returned to a more normal rhythm, and I was finally able to release the past and look forward to a future that was shaped by the lessons I had learned and the strength I had gained.